Hello, it's me, and I'm going to address some viewer questions. The first one is going to be by David Vincent Stephen, and he actually was kind enough to send me some pictures to really illustrate what the problem is. And he says, I have ended up with this situation while solving the 4x4 axis cube. Is there an algorithm for solving this problem? Well, thanks for the question and thanks for the pictures. Your version of the axis is different from mine, so the color scheme is different, so I used as much of a similarity as I can. But basically, this is the situation here, and it's clear that these two need to be swapped. So the problem with this is you do have a parity situation, but you have more than that. You also have a rotational situation, because even if you were to swap these two back, understand this is going to be rotated wrong and this is going to be rotated wrong. So this is rotated wrong and it's got to be swapped. So we can handle this in one of two ways. Either number one, rotate it first and then swap them, or number two, swap them and then rotate them. I'm going to swap them first because that's going to be the hardest part. The rest is going to really be just kind of getting back to your baseline solve. So the first thing to do in a situation like this, specifically this kind of situation, is find the layer that both of these are attached to. So that's going to be this. So if you have it set up like that, just find which layer both these turn in, and it's going to be this layer. So this is going to be our top layer over here. And what I want to do is I want to move these two opposite each other. Right now they're adjacent, but I've got to move them opposite. So which means I got to take this piece and move it to here. So remember, just to get a perspective, edge, 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 edge. These are all edges of a 4x4 axis cube. So we're going to do that first. Because once we do that, once we put them opposite each other, we can do our swapping algorithm. So I'm going to hold it here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to swap these two, do an adjacent edge swap. Now the problem is that when I do an adjacent edge swap, you are going to get misplacement with the edges in this layer. So you're going to get misplacement with the edges here and the edges here. These are going to be misplaced. So after I do an adjacent edge swap, I'm going to want to do an opposite edge swap to get these back. These two will still be opposite each other, but I just have to do some damage control here. So the first thing to do is let's get these two opposite each other by doing an adjacent edge swap over here. Then once they're opposite, I can do an opposite edge swap to get this misplacement back. So it's going to be 2R, this is an adjacent edge swap algorithm, 2R U, 2R U, 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U, 2R U, 2R, UI, 2R. Now hats off to you for getting it that far. It obviously took a lot of powering through it in order to make that happen. Anyway, so these two are swapped, but as promised, we have some misplacement over here. This has been rotated. So let's do an opposite edge swap. The very next, 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U, 2R, 2U. Okay. So what that did is that got everything back here, and these two are now opposite each other. So what we need to do to swap these is initially, it would seem pretty obvious to do what's called a URF algorithm to swap these, because that's the kind of parity that you have. You have this edge parity over here. So basically that would be like a situation like this. That's what you have now. If you have two that have to be swapped, this is a parity situation. Impossible to get on a 3x3. And this is simply solved by a URF algorithm, where you go 2U with the middle slice, 2R, 2F, then a middle 2U, an end slice 2U, and then 2F, 2R, 2U, no problem, it's fixed. The problem is, more than that got changed. But because these are not supercubes, you don't see the rotation that happens here. So if you tried to do that here, holding it like this, and doing 2U, let me get my perspective here, 2U, 2R, 2F, then 2U, 2U, and 2F, 2R, 2U. You can see that this did indeed swap these two. You can see how they're upside down, but this layer also got rotated. So you're going to end up with center rotation over here, so that's not going to work. So let's get this back. 2U, 2R, 2F, 2U, 2U, 2F, 2R, and 2u. Okay, so in the supercube, you can't use that. You have to use what I find to be the longest, most, well, for all intents and purposes, difficult algorithm of a 4x4 supercube. And that's how to swap these two without changing anything else. And the question is it possible to do that? And the answer is yeah, you should be able to do that. You just have to do it with a very specific algorithm. So here's what you do. Now that you've done that, now that you've got these opposite each other and you've corrected any issues over here, you do this algorithm. You start off with a middle slice with the middle UI. So it's going to be a middle slice UI, then do a end slice R, end slice FI, then end slice U, end slice RI, end slice F. Then you do a middle slice U and a middle slice D, then an end slice FI, R, UI, then F, RI, and then a middle slice D. It's quite a bit, I know, but it actually does the trick. So these two got swapped, and this center did not get rotated. So what you've actually done is you've completely taken the parity out of that. What we're going to do is we're going to put this on the top, and now we're just going to finish by doing our proper rotations. We know that these two are still rotated wrong, and this is rotated correctly. So what we're going to do is we're just going to do our algorithm to rotate these. So we're going to do, in this case, these two are rotated correct, so we have our line. So it's going to be F, R, U, RI, UI, FI. Okay, seeing that, what I'm going to do next is we just rotate these. We just place these in the proper place. So this is in the proper place here. So I'm going to hold it over here because this won't move. These will all be placed in the proper areas. So this these will all rotate. So we do our R, our SUNY R, U, RI, U, R, 2U, RI, and you can see that they're now all properly placed. These are out, but that's okay. We can put them in the usual method. So it's simply 3x3 methodology at this point. So let's do our corner rotation algorithm, or rather our corner translation algorithm. R, U, R, UI, LI, U, RI, UI, L. We see that none of them are, oh, this one is in. So we hold this in front of us. Let's get this right here, and we'll do U, R, UI, LI, U, RI, UI, L. Not in yet. U, R, UI, LI, U, RI, UI, L. Okay, we see that they're all in. They're just rotated wrong. So let's go ahead and do RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D. That's in. Move this around. RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D. And we keep going with this very familiar technique. And we keep rotating them all in place. RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D. And again, rotate this here. RI, DI, R, D, RI, DI, R, D. And it's done. And the parity was taken out. So thanks for the question. Basically, this was a problem with edge parity as well as wrong rotation, although you had it set up to a very nice symmetric configuration, but that's how you get out of that situation. Thanks for watching. Hello, me again, and I have another viewer question which I found to be kind of interesting. It really sort of sparked my thought process a little bit. This comes from Mace Windu, excellent name by the way, and he asks if a master Skewb is essentially a shape mod of a face-turning octahedron. So, master Skewb, face-turning octahedron. but with added corners, is a master pentultimate, this guy over here, a shape mod of a face-turning octahedron, but with added corners, this guy over here. So if this is a shape mod of this, would this be a shape mod of this? Well, I understand where you're coming from, and I understand where the question is coming from too. So I'm going to give you the short answer, but then I'm going to tell you kind of the direction that I'd like to go with that question, because I think it's a good point and it's something worth talking about. The short answer is I don't think that it is. And here's the thing. Let's start off with the premise. Let's put that back there. That the face-turning octahedron, or that the master Skewb, is a shape mod of a face-turning octahedron. And I don't think that it is. Because when you see that this is turning over here as equivalent to this turn, it's true that there are a lot of moves that correlate really directly. These pieces have a good correlation with each other, and these center pieces have good correlation with each other too, but that's where it kind of ends. So in actuality, when I make this turn over here and I make this turn over here, there is not an equivalent piece over here to suggest this, and like you correctly pointed out, there's no centers here to correlate with these pieces over here as well. So I would say that the actual cubic modification of a face-turning octahedron, a 3-layered face-turning octahedron, is not the master Skewb, it's actually the Rex Cube. Now there's also the Praxis Cube, which is I think came before this. It's also face modification. It's also cubic modification, but this one really has the most symmetric look to it. So this one has the most equivalencies to it. Notice that there's no centers here. All these pieces really correlate with the pieces that are in here, and the corners are the corners are representing these centers over here. So you have actual perfect parity with these two puzzles. So perfect equivalencies with these two. So that's where that's coming from. And bear in mind also, generally speaking, when you have a modification of a higher order puzzle to a lower order puzzle, you go from a face turner to a corner turner in order to pack in all the extra types of layers in a cubic structure. This is corner turner 2. When looking at the master pentultimate and this icosahedron over here, the main difference is this is a face turner here. This is also a face turner over here. If this were a dodecahedral modification, I would not expect it to turn at the face. Instead, the dodecahedral modification of this shape would actually be the Baja cube, or the Baja puzzle over here. So this turns at the corner, and every turn has an equivalency over here. Now this one may be more equivalent to the Eitan star, but you can see there's no center here, and all of these pieces correlate over here. And then you've got the corners that correlate over here, and then you've got the pieces that surround the corners as well. So solving one is much like solving the other. So this would be more in line with what's going on over there. And notice that this kind of a transformation has a very similar look over here as well, same kind of tapered look, so that you can see that there's more symmetry to this kind of a modification of a Platonic solid. Okay, so there's that, which begs the question, what kind of a puzzle is a pentultimate? It's a face turner, and it has a lot of the look of a master Skewb. And as a matter of fact, in my solve tutorial, I really did a lot of correlation with that, because a lot of the solve strategies and how I move these pieces around were very much like this. So I'm actually going to have this as a lead-in to 2 types of videos I'm going to do for the future based upon that very good question by Mace Windu. First off, what exactly is a pentultimate? If it's not a cubic modification of another kind of a puzzle, then what kind of a puzzle exactly is it? It's a face-turning, deep-cut dodecahedron, but what does that mean as opposed to things that are more superficial cuts? Well, let's take a look at our original pentultimate look. So if you look at a pentultimate, it's easy to see a correlation between the master Skewb and the master pentultimate. As you can see, a very similar look between the Skewb and the Pentultimate. It looks like a dodecahedral Skewb. And in actuality, the solve that I do with this is very similar. Just like the solve of this is similar to this guy here, the solve of this is very similar to this guy here. And I don't think I've done the solve of this, so I think I'm going to go ahead and do that in the very near future. But what kind of a puzzle is this exactly? The movement is two-layered, just like this. The main difference is that this is a face turner, and this is a corner turner. The other question is, well, what is this a modification of? So there are two questions that I'm going to leave you with, and I'm curious to see what you think about that. The first is, what exactly is a Pentultimate? What exactly is this puzzle? Is it its own thing? Is it a combination of puzzles? Is it a dodecahedral modification of some higher order puzzle? So that's the first question, exactly what is that? Is it, we can look at other dodecahedral puzzles. Here's the lowest layer version, Kilominx, which is our two-layer version. Maybe this is just a deeper cut version of that. If we don't like the fact that this doesn't have a center, but this one does, so maybe it's a deep version of a Megamix. Well, there's other types of face-turning dodecahedrons. There's also the crystal Pyramix, which has really the structure on the corners of a Kilominx, but you have slices over here. So maybe that's something. That we're dealing with. But what kind of a puzzle is this? How do we classify this? Is it just a deeper cut of a Megaminx? How did that happen? Is this a modification of something else? Let me know what you think, because there are other types of puzzles that might lend a hint as to exactly what kind of puzzle this is. There you go. Which we'll get back to. Okay, so that's the first question. What exactly is a Kilominx? The other question that I have is, let's correlate that question with what exactly is a Skewb. So a Skewb looks on the surface to be very unique. It's not purely a corner turner. It is a corner turner, but it's a deep cut corner turner, and it drags these corners with it. Now, in the past, I've correlated this with other types of puzzles. For instance, is this perhaps a shape modification of a face turning octahedron? Mace Windu's initial contention was that this was a modification of a face turning master octahedron. Well, I'd shown that that's not exactly correct, but maybe we can take it down a notch and say, well, is this then a cubic transformation of a face-turning octahedron, of a two-layer face-turning octahedron? And I think I made the contention that it might actually be something like that. And in reality, they are equivalent puzzles, equivalent in every way. So if we're going to say that this is the base puzzle of a face-turning octahedron, just before this, then this must be a cubic transformation, and the next step in line would be this correlating the Skewb with the master face-turning octahedron, whereas this was just kind of an evolutionary sidebar with that. And as such, you can even move up down the road. We talked about, well, this is the face-turning octahedron, rather. They call this the master face-turning octahedron. And this is correlated with its cubic transformation, which is this guy over here, the Rex Skewb. And I had a video on that detailing that correlation. So maybe we can call the Skewb simply a face mod of the most basic part of a face-turning octahedron. But there's a little bit of a complexity to that, a little bit of a question that I have. What about the fact that it is also a modification of this guy here? This is a Jing's Pyramix. A Jing's Pyramix is also Platonic solid. It's a three-layer Platonic solid, and this is, move for move, completely equivalent to this puzzle over here. This move here is equivalent to here, where this corner correlates this, and these centers, these corners here, are simply modifications of these centers. So this is also a modification of a Jing's Pyramix. Now, does that mean that this is a modification of the lowest level version of a Platonic solid, of a 8-sided Platonic solid, the face-turning octahedron, or is it a shape mod of the lowest level version of a 4-layer Platonic solid, a pyramidal puzzle? The next layer above this, of course, would be the master Pyramix, and the next level of this would be the Professor Pyraminx. Now, the cubic transformations of these puzzles, this puzzle, the next layer up, obviously would not be the Master Skewb. The next layer puzzle up of this would be the binocular cube over here, which is basically a cubic version of a Master Pyraminx, equipped even with the trivial tips. And the next level up would be the trinacular cube over here, which is move for move exactly the same thing. So these are all cubic transformations of these solids over here, and we all agree that these represent the four-sided Platonic solids, the triangles, while this represents the eight-layer Platonic solids, and this is a cubic transformation of both of these first pieces. So there's a degree of pluripotency with this puzzle where it seems to be a modification of both of these starts of these Platonic solids. Now you may say, well, wait a minute, the Jinx Pyraminx wouldn't be the start of this, would it? Because if this is a Master Pyraminx, the start of this would be the Pyraminx. But this is not a cubic transformation of a Pyraminx. The cubic transformation of a Pyraminx doesn't look like this, because you're seeing things here that you don't have with a Pyraminx, such as centers. The cubic transformation of a Pyraminx would be the Ivy cube, which is not part of this at all. So we can say that this maybe is not the cubic transformation of a four-sided puzzle of a tetrahedron, because the Jinx Pyraminx does not represent a line in this, it represents a sidebar. So my question to you is this, and I believe that there actually is an answer. I think that the Skewb is actually a cubic modification of one of the, what I call the quintessential earliest versions of one of these types of Platonic solids, either the 8-layered or the 4-layered, but it's not both. It's true that this is a cubic modification of a 2-layered face-turning octahedron, and it also is a cubic modification of a 2-layered face-turning tetrahedron. My question is it just so pluripotent that it is actually the start of both of these, or is there one that I would only count it as the most basic level of a modification of one of these Platonic solids? So what do you think it is? Is it only one of them? Is it both of them? And if it's one of them, which one is it? My contention is it is one of them for a very specific reason, and the hint is what you see right in front of you. Anyway, tell me what you think. The first question is, what is a pentultimate in terms of the classification scheme, and what is the Skewb in terms of being a cubic modification of what other Platonic solid, representing the most basic, simplest version of it? And understand too that sometimes a 2-layer version is not the simplest version, it's something that's just a bandaged version of a simplest version. That's your other hint. So tell me what you think, because to someone like me with a collection of all the puzzles that I have, the classification is really, really important and really fun to sort of look to see how we characterize all these things. Tell me what you think. Thanks for watching.